Hello, welcome back. I'm Statman Dave, and today I'm going to be discussing what impact a switch to a 4-3-3 would have on Manchester United. Remember to subscribe if you're new, but anyway, let's get this party started. So let's start with the basic level. Does the 4-3-3 actually suit Manchester United? At the end of the 23-24 season, you'd say yes from a player perspective. That's the system the squad was built to play. Although you'd say no, because it resulted in the 6th fewest expected points, followed by the manager getting sacked. Conversely, in Amorim's 3-4-3 this season, United have the 3rd most expected points and sit 6th in the actual table. Manchester United, though, dropped more points at home against Bournemouth, meaning only Newcastle and Brentford have let more points slip from winning positions in the Premier League than Manchester United. So is a 4-3-3 the solution? So in terms of the setup that Amorim has used this season, it is the 3-4-3. 2 attacking midfielders, wing-backs, building with a back 3 and 2 box-to-box number 8s. For Manchester United, of course, switching to a back 4 could get the best out of some players and improve United in certain areas. In terms of looking at Manchester United's squad right now, one of the big problems with AFCON coming up is losing both Amad Diallo and Bryan Mbeumo, arguably 2 of Manchester United's best players this season, barring Bruno Fernandes. In terms of AFCON, both players are gone. So what you could expect for Manchester United in this 4-3-3 shape is Diogo Dalot potentially moving into a right back position, Dorgu into a left back position, and potentially bringing in Benjamin Sesko, moving Mason Mount to the right hand side, Cunha to the left hand side, and Sesko as that number 9. In terms of what we've seen from Matheus Cunha, not only at Wolverhampton Wanderers but his career before over in Germany, is he does enjoy having an overlapping fullback behind him with a number 10 coming inside. But in terms of Ruben Amorim in recent weeks, he's enjoyed having the wrong-footed wing-back. We're talking Diogo Dalot being a right-footed player playing on the left, and of course Amad Diallo, a left-footed player playing on the right. So in terms of setups, obviously naturally what we'd expect from Amorim's 4-3-3, there'd be similar movements in his 3-4-3. In a sense, what I expect is both of the wide players to operate inside. That's either for both of them to operate almost as 2 number 10s, or alternatively with maybe Matheus Cunha as a false 9, or more like Liverpool with Firmino dropping off the line and having Mane and Salah running in behind. But in terms of Manchester United's squad, it definitely suits the 2 number 10 approach, or having an inside forward on the left, an inside forward on the right, and maybe an advanced forward in that midfield area. Matheus Cunha operating in the inside left position, Mason Mount on the inside right position, and then the fullbacks providing the width in the final third. What could be quite interesting for Manchester United is if Amorim, with this shape, sticks to a similar philosophy as before. That's having the wrong-footed wing-backs on either side. So both full-backs playing on the unnatural side, Diogo Dalot as a left-back and Dorgu as a right-back. For me, Dorgu's best football at United has actually come when he's played as a right wing-back. Of course, there's been limited minutes there, but notably last season in the Europa League, I think we saw some of the best of Dorgu's football at United. So actually playing him as a right back that moved into the final third into this attacking shape could be quite good. One of the big things at LAKEY is movement in behind defences was excellent. Of course, he scored a few goals making those moves. And you think the link with Mason Mount, with United kind of playing through the lines and breaking it into those inside areas, having someone that could move off the ball into the wide areas with Mason Mount feeding him could work really well. In terms of makeups for the parts of the pitch, let's talk about that defensive midfield area. Because I think a big part of Manchester United and the change that it give United, of course, is having a 3-man midfield. This would help United in terms of pressing in certain areas, but also having an extra body in the centre of the pitch has its natural benefits. But I think the big thing for Manchester United with this setup is arguably United is still lacking a number 6. A player to control the tempo and to control the team. Of course, I've been very impressed with Aiden Heaven as a centre-back. In the back 3, his timing of pass and movement is very good. It's what I want to see going forward. Yes, he's a young player. Yes, he'll make mistakes, but his quality in possession has been outstanding for me. So bumping him a little bit further forward and playing him as a number 6 would allow Manchester United to play with a natural kind of 3-man midfield. I think one of the big things with this shape and system, yes, we could see rotation. Yes, we could see Bruno Fernandes still moving into that attacking midfield line like he does at times with Amorim's 3-1-6. But I do think having a midfield base of 3 players is the big benefit of this system. So is that maybe Bruno Fernandes's best position? You could once again argue that he could probably do, a bit better playing high up the pitch as one of the inside players with Matheus Cunha as the inside right. It would allow that kind of link up with Dorgu once again. But also Mason Mount is probably better at protecting the ball deep. I think in this shape and system, Casemiro is not the 6. We've seen that before under Erik ten Hag. The Casemiro in this shape with 2-3-8s is not the 6. His mobility is not quite there. But where he'd be suited is in very much a box-to-box role. One of the best things we've seen from Casemiro this season is from set pieces and getting into the penalty area. Giving someone like Casemiro the freedom in this shape is something I've wanted for a while. He could turn the ball over high, get shots away, get into the penalty area to overload the opposition's backline. So Casemiro very much would have to be a box-to-box player in this shape. Of course, the big talk about Manchester United at the moment is about Kobby Mainoo. Where is he going to be used in this period where Man United could really use him? Right now, United should not loan Kobby Mainoo. At the start of the season, they should have loaned Kobby Mainoo. Because in the 3-4-3, for me, where he should be playing is in the attacking positions. I've said this before, I think Kobby's ability on the ball, ability to dribble people, his touches in tight areas are very good. And also, he scored some pretty important goals for Manchester United under Ruben Amorim. So for me, he was kind of more of an attacking player. And again, you look at United spending in the summer buying Matheus Cunha and Bryan Mbeumo, plus Mason Mount, there's already enough players to play number 10. So Kobby could have spent a season playing on loan, learning, developing, rounding his game out, which he, could really do with. Again, young player, you expect them to not have a very rounded game. But for me, in this shape and setup, you're probably expecting Kobby to play once again in one of those attacking positions. What that could mean for Manchester United is Bruno Fernandes deep with Mason Mount and Heaven. This would give them a proper creative midfield. And why I like the idea of a 4-3-3 with the 3-4-3 is there's similarities in shape and positions if Amorim does what we're saying here, playing his 2 wide players inside with the fullbacks overlapping. Most important thing here is I think it gives Manchester United a really solid base in build-up. And I think we've seen some goals this season that may not have happened with the opponent scoring because United's build-up has been quite poor in this area. I think from a centre-back perspective as well, having a 3-man midfield takes the responsibility off Leny Yoro in terms of ball playing and the other centre-back. Of course, in this shape, it would definitely be Matthijs de Ligt playing as the other centre-half. He's been United's best defender from a defensive perspective this season. I think Heaven's been the best player in terms of ball playing this season. But again, for Manchester United, if Leny Yoro is maybe benched, of course, Lisandro Martinez is another player that could very much suit this role. It would allow de Ligt to play on that natural side, and United, once again, would have one really good ball player at the back, one ball player in defensive midfield, and then 2 players that can drop in, that can push forward, that can be aggressive off the ball. I think the big thing with this shape and setup is it should allow United to press a little bit better. But let's take a look at one of the goals United conceded this season, because the build-up that United could get, or Amorim could get from a 4-3-3, could have helped that goal. So taking a look at this Evanilson goal, let's just build it out from the back and see where Man United's 3-man midfield would potentially appear. Of course, Bournemouth are one of the most aggressive teams in the Premier League. They press back 5s with 3 attackers, 2 midfielders, and then a back 5 shape that almost works on, flank to flank with the wing back jumping high. We can see Smith at the bottom of the shot jumping high, pressing United on the right-hand side. Of course, what we could see with United's 3 defensive midfielders, or 3 midfielders, sorry, is 1 DM centrally, Casemiro where he is, and then the left central midfielder, Bruno Fernandes, sitting deeper in that position. What that would allow United when facing this kind of pressing structure would be that ball inside, either directly from Luke Shaw into that central midfield space, or dropping it to Diogo Dalot and then looking inside. Of course, in this instance, Luke Shaw goes long. Bournemouth turn over the ball in midfield. Again, another benefit of the 3-man midfield would be better transitional play when they've lost the ball in these areas, because you'd still have that the 3-man midfield plus the 2 centre-backs, where Bournemouth just carry straight through. Casemiro drops off. The through ball is really good to Evanilson, and he finishes it off really well. But just going back to kind of like maybe this screenshot in a sense, Casemiro can't really jump because he's got no protection. If, for example, United were playing a 3-man midfield, potentially Casemiro could have jumped there, and the other central midfielder could have moved over to screen the pass into Evanilson. Again, solving a problem for United. and avoiding a simple goal conceded. So I think one of the benefits of the 4-3-3, not only does it mean the opposition have to think more about United's build-up, but it gives United a 2-3 structure, whereas United under Amorim are very much a 3-2 structure. These little nuances are quite important in football and will give you an advantage in certain areas, but I do think United with 3 in midfield will help their build-up. But let's move into the middle of the pitch in the 4-3-3 shape. Again, there is fluidity in this shape and structure. At times, the wide players could be wide, but we want in the final third for them to narrow up. But just in terms of kind of a progression perspective, but also a counter-pressing perspective, United could look better with a 3-man midfield. So in terms of talking about Manchester United and that kind of the midfield unit in a sense, at times this season we've seen midfield 3 be created by maybe one of the number 10s dropping in to create that shape and structure. For Manchester United, again, having that shape and structure means that if United kind of play those passes into midfield and, utilize that midfield 3 to try and overload the opponents, and let's say they kind of win the ball back in midfield, the benefit of kind of having 3 players in that central area is straight away you can press. And at times United have pressed well, but the mobility in midfield in Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro is just not quite there. So when United lose the ball in this shape, it should allow them potentially this season to press better. Again, long term with recruitment, United should be able to press in a 2 if they had the, physical attributes to do that. But just take a look at another goal that United conceded this season that could potentially be avoided with a 3 in midfield. Let's take a look at Matthias Tell's goal against Man United. Another game that United dominated that should have won. But coming down to kind of this moment, this is the type of thing that might change some things for Manchester United. So building on the left-hand side with Luke Shaw, we can clearly see that midfield 3 that's being created with Mason Mount dropping off the line. At the moment, it's Ugarte and Bruno in that central midfield zone. But kind of the idea is here. So we see a good touch from Bruno Fernandes. The press comes in from Bentancur, and he ships the ball to Mason Mount, who plays a little bit of a poor pass to the right of Benjamin Sesko, and Spurs win the ball back. From this position, United look pretty well in terms of the natural shape that Ruben Amorim's created with his 3-4-3, creating a 3-man midfield in certain moments of the game, looks good to press. And this is where we think about individuals for Manchester United. Once again, there's enough United players around the ball that Spurs should not emerge into this type of situation after that moment we just saw there. This is kind of where you look at tactics and you look at player profiles, and then you think United don't have it right in terms of balancing their midfield. Could it be helped out by 3-man midfield? Potentially, but we saw similar makeups there already in a 3-man midfield, and Spurs break through. Not only do United not get back into shape properly, Bruno Fernandes is the holding midfielder at the moment. Ugarte gets simply bypassed. Hence why I'm talking about not having Ugarte or Casemiro as a 6 in a 4-3-3 shape. It just quite frankly won't work. We've seen it too many times this season and last season, both players just getting bypassed in really key moments. Both of them are more 8s that jump, 8s that press, that would suit playing central midfield in this shape versus actually playing as a sole holding number 6. This has been a hole in United squad for so long. We've spoken about this so many times, but Casemiro or Ugarte in that position doesn't work. Hence why United really need to go and buy a proper number 6. Adam Wharton or Belieber. That improves United in these types of areas. Because going back to this example of the goal, we see that Ugarte not only gets dribbled in that moment, but he's dragged over to left-hand side, which simply allows Matthias Tell the space to rock himself back and get a shot on goal that's deflected past Seny Lomans. Once again, could that goal be stopped by a 4-3-3? Potentially, but it's more important in terms of which player is playing in that position. Hence why I think Aiden Heaven is probably the only player in United's squad that can really facilitate that kind of role going forward. And continuing that theme of Manchester United being a little bit more solid defensively in midfield by having more bodies in there. So we take Dewsbury Hall's goal against United, the winner, when Everton had 10 men. One of the most frustrating games I've ever been to at Old Trafford. Look, this annoyed me a lot. The 4-4 draw with Bournemouth was quite a fun game to watch. Yes, the result didn't come, but it was a lot better. Then you got more annoyed by United's last 10 minutes performance against Brighton, where they let them back into the game, than the 4-4 draw. But just talking about the shape and setup, of course, Everton are building. They look for the ball inside to James Garner. At this point, United are pretty well set. Bruno Fernandes could potentially be a little bit more narrow to make the interception, but the ball into Dewsbury Hall's feet is too easy. One of the centre-backs, Lenny Yoro in this game, should really be jumping into this position to press. And again, that's something United have struggled with, is making those decisions. And Lenny Yoro is a young defender. He needs time to develop. But at that time, he's got to jump. Versus maybe United having a 3-man midfield. Let's say Luke Shaw isn't a centre-half. He's a defensive midfielder. You've got a player dealing with Dewsbury Hall in this zone. So imagine that being Aidan Heaven stepping into defensive midfield in a 4-3-3 shape. You probably alleviate that problem. You don't allow Dewsbury Hall to, drive towards United's goal. Bruno Fernandes tries to make a challenge, doesn't get back. Is a little bit fortuitous with a tackle from Lenny Yoro. And again, the finish is very, very good. But going back to that, would a defensive midfielder solve that problem? Yes. But also, would a centre-back jumping out solve that problem? Yes. But I do think the 4-3-3, the 3-4-3, they work together well as systems, and it allows Man United to basically be a little bit different in certain games with their build-up, with their pressing and so forth. It creates another problem for a manager, and I'm fully hope Ruben Amorim adds this to his repertoire in terms of shapes, because naturally it does make sense, and it makes sense with the players United have right now with AFCON. But in terms of the last little bit, so we've spoken about kind of the pressing side of it, the counter-pressing side, possession, building out from the back. What about offensively? Does a 4-3-3 offensively make sense for United? Well, yes. We go back to looking at our tactics board here. So let's say United are in the final third, and it's the shape we mentioned previously. It's the two players, nice and narrow. Both of the wide players operating as inside forwards. It's both fullbacks pushing high up the pitch. It's a very, very similar shape. In a sense, all that's happened here is Heaven's moved from a centre-back position. Both of the centre-halves have narrowed up in that area, which has allowed Manchester United to create a shape that's very similar right now. I'd like United to be able to play in a 4-3-3, so you could play that in different phases with a 3-4-3. Having a libero or a centre-back that can step into midfield could allow United to attack like this. And I do think this is, again, another thing that Ruben Amorim should look at long term. The width being held by both of the fullbacks, the two 10s in central positions. Again, we could move this round in a sense of the fluidity of this could be quite good. We could see Mount playing high at times, Cunha deep. We could see Bruno playing high, Mount. I think there's a lot of rotation, which I think would help Manchester United in kind of the three, or the two central midfielders in the 3-man midfield, plus the two 10s. I think there could be a lot of rotation there, which could make Man United even more dangerous. So take a look at the opening goal of the game against Bournemouth. This kind of highlights how United could attack in a 4-3-3 shape. Surprise, surprise, it's quite similar to the 3-4-3. Those systems have always been interchangeable in football. Dropping a DM into as a halfback, going the other way. Let's say Heaven started in central midfield, but in this game, let's say we want to create a back three in build-up. That's all Heaven needs to do. Drop back, split the centre-backs. United have created a 3-2 base from a 4-3-3. Again, the nuances are not really different from those two shapes. So in terms of United, let's pick up the play with Ahmad driving inside. United move the ball into midfield. It goes to Casemiro, and we can kind of see a shape that's similar. Diogo Dalot's the wing-back in this instance. Got a very fluid midfield three. Our attackers are spread across the pitch. And Matheus Cunha in the central position. Mount, and of course, Bryan Mbeumo's out of shot. But once again, we mentioned before, the fluidity. From this position, we can see Diogo Dalot would be in a natural fullback position, taking on his defender, driving inside, and crossing to the back post. Isn't this just a natural 4-3-3 shape, minus a defensive midfielder, because your centre-back has dropped deep? It's exactly the same offensive structure. Again, Diogo Dalot crossing the ball into the box, coming off Ahmad, coming off the crossbar and him heading it in. But this kind of 5-man attack with the two attacking midfielders narrow is exactly what United would create in the shape if they did go for a 4-3-3. So it's very, very similar for Manchester United, but there are nuances there. You mentioned previously kind of having the DM a little higher. Both of the centre-backs are going to be a lot more narrow. But once again, your forwards are going to provide attacking options inside, and the two fullbacks going to providing width in the final third. So once again, it makes a lot of sense. I think the issue for Manchester United this season for me, I've said many times, isn't really the shape, the system, it's the player quality. And United are on a journey, and we know that it's one of these things to kind of look about, would the system have changed? Would it have prevented the goals being scored? If we take a look at the most recent goals conceded, if we look at the last 10 Premier League goals conceded, perhaps the 3 we've looked at could be avoided with an extra midfielder in build-up, in pressing, in counter-pressing. But if you look at the other 7, 3 of those came from set pieces, and the other 4 came from individual errors or poor positioning. With a change in system, would that really prevent these types of goals? In short, better players or players better suited to Amorim's football would help prevent these goals. We did a video earlier in the season taking a look at the number of mistakes and errors Manchester United players make. So this shouldn't be a surprise. But new players cost money and only can be signed in a transfer window. 2 things not available right now. In the meantime, I think having the ability to switch the system and create a bit more unpredictability in the game plan is only a good thing for Ruben Amorim in Manchester United, and will improve him as a coach. And it will also make Man United difficult to play against. But also, as we mentioned previously, there could be in-game changes in the formation. Again, changing things, looking at what the opponents are doing. For example, we saw Bournemouth's press in a 5-2-3. Moving to a 2-3 in build-up would mean that Bournemouth would have to change. So you're starting to dictate the flow of the game with little tweaks in the system, and it could work very, very well. But anyway, guys, that is the 4-3-3. That is Manchester United, Ruben Amorim, with potentially a new system. I'm kind of excited for the next few games to see whether we get to see this in action. I've been Statman Dave, of course. If you are new around here, subscribe if you're new and get into the comments if you want to see Ruben Amorim play a 4-3-3. And we'll catch you in the next one. See you later.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, why not check out some more content on the Statman Dave YouTube channel.